it's a very fast-changing industry. You think people have been making wine for, I don't know, 5,000 years, guesstimate. And it's amazing how much have changed in the South African wine scene in the last 10 to 20 years. It's actually been very dynamic.
Hi, Boela, how are you?
Petra, very good. Thank you very much for having me on your show. I'm looking forward to it. It sounds very exciting.
Yeah, and you are at Groot Constantia, and you're the winemaker there.
No, that is correct. I've been very fortunate to be involved in this beautiful historic property for 22 years now. So I've been winemaker for 22 years.
Amazing. So you've made your mark there then.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to arrive here very young. I think it was 27, 28 when I arrived here at Groot Constantia. So I mean, yeah, what a beautiful place to have this opportunity. And I must say, a very interesting part. It's the South African wine industry is that's about just shy of 100,000 hectares. The whole industry. The whole Constantia Valley is only 400, so like 0.4% of the whole South Africa. So it's a very historical, the oldest vineyards in South Africa. Well, oldest farms, the wine farms in South Africa here, but quite a small part of the industry, of the larger industry. But yeah, so interesting. So we're about 7-8 kilometers south of the city center. So if you look at a map of Cape Town and you start in Cape Town city center and you drive along Table Mountain, you're about 8 or 9 kilometers south of the city center as you wind along the mountain. When we are on the southern steps of Table Mountain, so it's quite a small little viticultural area here. Our other winemaking friends, Durbanville, Stellenbosch, they're about 50-60 kilometers to northwest of us, northeast of us. So we are sort of quite removed geographically, quite far removed from our other friends. So it is quite a unique little winemaking niche that we have here. Those of you that's familiar with the Cape and the Cape climate will know that Newlands, Kirstenbosch, that part of Cape Town is wet. That's some of the highest rainfalls in Cape Town. And as the crow flies, we're actually very close to Newlands and Cape Town, so we get more rain than London in the year. So it is quite a unique little wine growing area that we have here. It's beautiful, but it is it's quite an interesting, unique little spot that we have here.
But now wines or grapes don't always want rain. It's not always good for grapes certain times of the year, isn't it?
Yeah, Petra, I must say the timing of this interview is quite interesting because I woke up 4 o'clock this morning with a thunderstorm and only 5 mils of rain. It was like, oh geez, we've still got about 30% of the harvest to go. And the 5 mils of rain we had this morning wasn't really what we ordered, but it's okay. There's always a bit of a curveball, but we managed that. So it's not the end of the world.
Now, Boela, how did you get into the wine industry or what was it that inspired you to become a winemaker?
Petra, it's purely by chance. I forgot to turn that off. Petra, it's purely by chance. I grew up in the northern suburbs, Durbanville, which is quite a well-known wine growing region, but not on a wine farm. I grew up in the suburbs, and I went to Stellenbosch to study science. I've always enjoyed science from when I was at school, so I just went to Stellenbosch University to just do the straight science degree, and then arriving at university, there were you may be interested in viticulture and enology, which is very similar. The first year is actually very similar. And obviously being in Stellenbosch, we explored the winelands of Stellenbosch quite comprehensively as first year students. And it did appeal to me. So I made the switch from just the pure science to agricultural science. And it's many years later, and it's one of the best things that could have happened to me.
Amazing. And now I've read this article where it talks about the fact that winemaking is not just a science, but it's also an art. And what is your opinion on that?
It's definitely a bit of both. We definitely rely on the scientific part, which I do enjoy. We definitely rely quite heavily on that. And then, so I mean, if your signs need to be sound, especially, the microbiological part, there's a lot of yeast and bugs that you need for winemaking, which is important. And there are also the yeast and the bacteria that you don't need, that you have to keep away. So, so you definitely need to understand the chemistry and the microbiology of wine to make a sound wine. But it's amazing. I'd never forget. There's definitely definitely artistic expression as well. That's quite interesting. It's when I just started my career in the industry. I was assistant winemaker at Stellenbosch way back when, and I remember there were a few neighbors that bought one vineyard. There was one big vineyard that was subdivided into 3 parts, and 3 very well-known winemakers at the time bought it. And I was in the fortunate position to sort of taste the wine from these 3 guys and how different the wines were, which goes back to your point, So even though there's definitely a lot of science, but it was amazing how the 3 different guys, how their personality really showed in the wines they made from the exact same vineyard. There are a lot of guys making some fabulous wines today, all buying grapes from similar vineyards, or even the same vineyard in certain instances. And again, it's quite remarkable how different the wines are, from the same vineyard. So there's definitely a artistic touch to the winemaking process as well.
And this personal touch is, for me, so amazing. And I'm just wondering now, also from where you started 20 odd years ago to where you are now, how much has changed in the industry?
The industry quite a bit. The South African wine industry, to give an indication, we were in economic isolation in the apartheid years until 1992. In 1992, there was an election in South Africa, and the people voted yes, which means there was a yes or no referendum, and the people indicated yes, they do want this democracy to go ahead. And when the people voted yes, even though Nelson Mandela was only walked free 2 years later, I think the whole world saw that South Africa, the people of South Africa, actually wanted the country to be a democratic republic. So, so since '92, the world opened its doors again, and we allowed it to trade freely. And the wine industry, obviously, also saw the results of that. But with our sport as well, I think obviously we're a very passionate sporting nation. But I think we realized in wine as well, that we thought that we were so great, operating in isolation for 20 or 30 years. And we realized, we still had a lot to learn. And that is at that time when I finished my studies and entered the wine industry. And it's amazing. It's amazing how what I've experienced in my not even 30 years, 25 years as a young winemaker. Well, not so much anymore. But what I've experienced is how we going into the industry, first looking at inspiration, looking at places like California and Australia, which at the time, they're very successful. For us, as a relative new world country outside Europe, what we use those as models, and then very quickly realized that it doesn't work for us, and how the model changed, for us sort of looking out to other countries, and then some very young and innovative and sort of groundbreaking work done in the Swartland by guys like Evan Sardi and Artie Badenhorst that said to us, but listen, guys, why are we trying to sort of, why are we looking outwards at other people, they're looking at your own land, looking sort of, at your own what nature gave you for inspiration. And that is this. So there's been quite a big change, I think, in the first sort of 10 years from me working in the wine industry. But the changes in the whole philosophy, towards winemaking, that I thought really added a lot of value. And still, there's a lot of young guns making some really interesting wines. We spoke about science and how sort of certain protocols that you have to follow, and you get some of the younger winemakers, they just literally throw the textbook out the window and do things totally off the wall. Some of the wines fabulous, some of them not so much, but it doesn't really matter. There's a lot of experimentation and sort of really interesting concepts that's coming. So it's a very very fast changing industry. You think people have been making wine for, 5,000 years, guesstimate. And it's amazing how much have changed in the South African wine scene in the last 10 to 20 years. It's actually been very dynamic. Personally, I'm at Groot Constantia. It's the oldest wine farm in South Africa with a history going back. My math is probably going to let me down, but what is that? 85? What is that? 15? Geez, is that about 33, 37 years, give or take? more than 3 centuries of winemaking. And for us to follow trends like that, for a wine estate that's more than 3 centuries old, it's probably not wise. So we'll sort of, take a more cautious approach to some of the trends that's happening in the industry, but we are aware of what's happening. And if there's something at work, we'll slowly sort of incorporate it into our philosophy and our winemaking as well. So, yeah, but very careful, like I said, it doesn't really suit the grand dame of Groot Constantia, to change too quickly. I mean, like I said, it's quite an old brand with a very historical approach for a very long time.
Well, this is what I wanted to say is, there's a bit of a prestige also about the wine, and because it's got this history as well.
Alberto, that's definitely something. I actually spoke to our marketing manager. We had this discussion recently, and I think that's something. Especially if you sign up for a historical estate like Groot Constantia, I think you definitely have to make sure that you align with the philosophy of the estate. I mean, I think it'll be selfish for a winemaker to come here and try to sort of really showcase your style over the estate. That's not really fair. Like I said, it's a estate that's more than 3 centuries old, and you have to respect that. You have to respect the tradition and the history that goes with it. So we are really trying to follow raw traditional style wines. I think that really suit the history and the tradition of the property.
But now on your farm, how old is the oldest vine?
Interesting. So there's the Old Vine project in South Africa people are celebrating vineyards at 35 years plus and making some really amazing wines. Interesting. Constantia, like we quickly referred to earlier, Constantia we're very close to the ocean. We're about 5 kilometers. Hart Bay is literally over Constantiaberg, 5 kilometers, very close. So we have a very strong maritime influence, which means very moderate summers, but also not very cold winters. And we've seen, for various reasons, that especially the lack of proper winter cold. I mean, for us, the average minimum in the coldest months is something like 11 degrees. Wow. I think the people in Europe, can't really comprehend that. That's the minimum, the average minimum of 11. So that is not cold. A lot of the famous vineyards in Europe, they get snow in winter time, and it's actually the vineyard actually need that for various reasons. But because we don't have that really sort of proper winter cold, we've seen that the quality actually started to decline after about 20 plus years. So we uproot our vineyards after 25 years. In my 22 years, there's literally one 1 hectare vineyard that has not been uprooted. The rest of the farm has all been uprooted and replanted in the last 22 years. So that is just again a function of where we are, just because of our climate. So the oldest vineyard is probably 24, 25 years old. The average age of our vineyard is only about 11 or 12 years old. So it's relatively young vineyards that we use on the property.
So what is it about the older vineyards that why do you have to take them out? What does it do to the wine or to the grapes?
Okay, so this what I'm saying now is not really scientifically based, so I should be very careful what I say now. But what I say, that's my opinion. So my gut feel is that the reason why people celebrate older vineyards, I think there are a couple of reasons. The first thing is you often see that your young vineyards are very vigorous. So you get big canopies and quite vigorous and bigger crops as well. But the most important thing is probably in your more continental climates, away from the ocean, where you get warm, dry summers and cold, wet winters. Especially with the warm, dry summers, I think an older vine with an older and a deeper root system can dig really down. So when you get heat waves or just sort of your more tricky conditions during summertime, you've got a bigger buffer system because you've got deeper roots and you've got a bigger trunks and bigger structures to actually buffer those spikes. And so that is probably why the older vineyards, it's better balanced and also it's better buffered because of the deeper root system. For us, because our climate is so moderate, there's not really water stress here. For us in Cape Town, if we get to 29, 30 degrees C, we think it's a heat wave. So, I think so because of the moderate temperatures, we don't really need that the older and deeper root system, to buffer the vineyards against heat waves or anything, or drought for that matter. And the second thing is where we are. I'm not exactly sure why, but our yield is relatively low. I think we get an average about 6 to 7 tons a hectare, which is quite low, and that is just naturally what we get from the vineyards. So that's why I believe that we don't, for us in specifically the climate where we are, relative wet winters and not too hot summers. I think we've found that the younger vineyards, just give better precision, better fruit, just sort of better excitement in the wines altogether. So yeah, and we've seen that quantity starts to decline over years. And also quality. We just don't get that sort of intensity of fruit on the older vines that we get from the younger vineyards. So it's quite a contradiction that I'm sure you've spoken to a few winemakers over the world with your program, and they probably celebrated the older vineyards getting amazing quality from the older vineyards, and where we are, it's actually the opposite.
But coming back to the vineyards. Or the winemaking, because Constantia's got this wonderful history. Is there from centuries ago? Is there some information that you still have about the winemaking of the time, and that you could continue this sort of history?
Interesting. So. We have some of our board members, notably Hanneke de Pre. She was the director of Heritage Western Cape, and Hanneke is a wealth of information. So now she found some amazing information. So we do have some inscriptions, journals, that go back to the late early 1800s. That we've referred to. It is quite interesting though. They found some wine quite a while ago. They found 2 lots of wine, one going back to 1791, the other going back to 1821. 1821 is quite important. I think that the wines that made Constantia famous, especially I think the fact that Napoleon Bonaparte drank the sweet wine from Groot Constantia on Saint Helena when he was in exile. Obviously, that was quite an important thing, and the fact that Napoleon died in 1821 made it quite important. So probably Napoleon never had that particular wine. But it was quite an interesting vintage. So that 1821 Grand Constance, and it was called, we still honor the name Grand Constance, was auctioned recently. The first bottle went for just under R500,000, and the second one went for like 960, just under R1 million, which was quite interesting. Now, we did a bit of research last year. You know what the interesting thing is? That now my history may be out with a year or two. But as far as I know, that I think it was Pasteur that found that wine, that the whole fermentation process was microbiological and not chemical. That happened only in 1834. You can just do a quick Google search, but it's around about 1830s, I think, which is like more than a decade after these 1820 Grand Constances were made. So it's quite interesting that people made wine in 1790 and 1820. Those wines were still drinkable. The wines were still amazing 2 centuries later, but they had no equipment, and B, they had no knowledge. They thought that wine was, the fermentation was like just a chemical oxidation kind of process. They were not aware of the fermentation by yeast. So yes, so there are some references to the whole winemaking process, but considering the lack of information available at the time, we probably shouldn't follow it too closely. So we keep an eye on it, and we try to incorporate some of the older winemaking, to some extent. But obviously we need to get some consistency in the product as well. So we can't go too gung ho in the winemaking.
But now, what is the guarantee that bottle is still a good wine? Because I mean, if it's a process, a fermentation process, does it stop in the bottle?
Yeah, that's quite interesting. So fermentation is sugar obviously ferments to alcohol, and we've done some analysis. We analyzed some wine at UC Davis in California. Some of the wines were analyzed at Geisenheim in Germany, and then locally at Stellenbosch University as well. So we have a good idea what the sugar and the alcohol is. We're still battling with genetic testing. It's not there yet. The DNA is broken down quite substantially, so we can't do DNA testing. But just by looking at the sugar and the alcohol, you can have a good idea what at what ripeness level they picked it. Now, what happens is if you look at the combination, there's actually an equation. It's called Dell's equation, that if you combine sugar and alcohol, because sugar is a preservative, okay? Sugar, that's why people use sugar, in jam and sweet preserve to preserve fruit in the old days. So sugar is a very good preservative, and obviously we all know alcohol is also preservative. And the combination, those two combine to a very to very efficient preservative. So when your juice ferments, you get to a point where you have a combination of X sugar and 4.5 alcohol, or vice versa, and that the two combined make sure that the wine won't ferment any further. So we actually use that equation in the cellar when we make our wine. And it's amazing. The wine is actually microbial stable. You can ferment it, you leave it in the barrel for 2 years, and it doesn't re-ferment. So by the time it goes to bottle, this wine's not going to ferment any further. So yeah, the wine's actually pretty stable.
But now, like you said, those days they didn't know the formula. And do you think it was just done by intuition, or how was that possible?
You know what, Petra, I think there was a lot of trial and error. It's very interesting. I mean, that is how champagne started. In France in the mid 1600s, probably in other parts of France as well, and in the south of France in the 1500s, and in the UK also. Sort of early 1600s. I think it was just trial and error. So I'm sure that some of the wines went bust. But there are so many things people do in the wine industry. In the old days, people used egg white fining. There's people use egg white in wine, in red wine, and in Europe they often do that. And now we know that there are actually some enzymes that keep that'll actually keep the wine healthy. So in the egg white, so it's actually quite amazing. Copper that people sometimes use. It's quite interesting that people found in the old days they used copper fittings because copper was more pliable. Today we know that copper will take some reduced sulfur characters. So I think a lot of these things that people used in wine was purely accidental or just for practical reasons. And then years later they found just there was actually it actually had side a benefit as well. So I do think that a lot of the people definitely did not know about this whole sugar and alcohol and this whole equation. It must have been something that just sort of happened, and it just worked for them.
Yeah, naturally then. But it's so amazing, that you have this rich history also on Groot Constantia. But now I've also spoken to winemakers who talk about organic farming and organic way of making. And is that something that you also do at Groot Constantia?
Definitely. It's interesting you ask about what's changed in the industry, and I failed to mention that I do think there's a lot bigger awareness of the environment today than we had when I entered the industry 25 years ago. So we're not certified organic, but I think all the wine farmers, try to some extent, to minimize the use of pesticide. A lot of guys for pesticide, they're going biological. We use ladybirds and little wasps to control your mealybug. There are very interesting fungi that people actually use to control some of the mildews that you find in summertime. So there's a big movement, of going biological or organic. Unfortunately, where we are with a very high rainfall, it is very difficult to go full organic. So not to use any of especially when it comes to your summertime fungal infections. So we still may go, but having said that, even the stuff that we use today, it's actually quite amazing. So it's got a half-life, very quick breakdown in the environment, because there are little streams. Actually, where I'm sitting now, there's a little stream that runs in wintertime that runs just on the border of the property, and that little stream you can follow that all the way down to Muizenberg to False Bay, the Atlantic Ocean. So we are actually quite aware of it's quite a sensitive area where we are with a lot of green belts and a lot of water, and we are quite aware of where this water goes to. So we are definitely trying to be environmentally aware. So it's definitely something that all the viticulturists and winemakers are very aware of, and really try to look after the environment.
Well, it also probably comes with the fact that that there's more knowledge also now about organic farming and about all these things that it is possible to do it or easily to do it.
Oh, totally. And I must say this, I don't have a wine bottle on me, but the South African wine industry has been very proactive. They started a program called Integrated Production of Wine, where the whole industry is sort of, literally 25 years ago in 97, when they started to lay down the rules. And it's actually quite a comprehensive program when they take, it's even sound pollution that they take into consideration, what you do with your solid waste and your liquid waste. It's an amazing program, but we try to get more sustainable practices in the wine industry, and they come and audit you every 3 years, where they go through all your records and see what you have done. So the South African industry as a whole has been really sort of working towards a more sustainable farming for nearly 25 years, which is quite remarkable.
That's amazing. I mean, that's so reassuring, really, that that's been done. But now, Boela, tell me, as a winemaker, do you have a favorite wine to make? Or is there a specific wine that you would say that's your favorite wine?
Yeah, Petra, I'm not supposed to say that, but because we actually make quite a big range, and it's fun. I must say, I do enjoy, from the sparkling and the dry wines all the way to the reds and the sweets. But on white wine, I don't know, Chardonnay it really is something that I do enjoy. It's even though the Constantia Valley is known, I think half the Constantia Valley is planted to Sauvignon Blanc, and our Sauvignon Blanc's done really well for us. But for me, when I invite friends over, and especially in summertime, and you want to open a bottle of white wine with over lunch, I often go for Chardonnay. So I mean, I do enjoy working with the variety. It's very rewarding working with the variety. Just a very layered and sort of complex wine. So for white wine, I do enjoy the work with Chardonnays. And then red wines are flagships to Governor's Reserve. It's a cab-based blend, and there's something about blending. I know there's a big focus internationally on single vineyards, showing the expression of a particular site, which obviously has its merits as well. But for me, to take the best of the estate and say, but this is what Groot Constantia, because we're in an estate, we're only allowed to use the fruit according to the South African legislation. If you're an illicit estate or registered estate, you're only allowed to use the fruit of your property. So we don't buy any grapes from our neighbors or another wine growing region. It's literally only what we grow here on the property. And it is quite nice to say, but listen, the Governor's Reserve, it's the best that the property can produce. So there's this Cabernet worked, a bit of that Cabernet Franc and a bit of that Merlot. And it's actually quite an amazing process. The blending process is really rewarding. It's quite amazing. It's quite a long process. You don't do that in 1 or 2 days. It's like quite a few months, sort of leading up to making this blend, and really try to sort of capture the essence of Groot Constantia and also of a particular vintage. Some vintages get warm, dry years, or you get cooler, wetter years. And you try to sort of, put all of that Constantia and all the elements, try to put all of that together and say, but this is a representation of my interpretation of, that particular vintage for Groot Constantia. So from that point of view, I really enjoy making the Governor's Reserve red blend.
Well, I would say if you're friends of Boela, then you always assured that you open a bottle of wine, or that there's a good bottle of wine at a braai.
That's what we do in Cape Town. I must say it is. That is something that we do as winemakers. If we don't make wine, we drink wine, we talk about wine, and it's actually quite interesting. There's always something interesting from all over the world, something quirky or something really spectacular. So that is good fun. That is one of the perks being in the industry.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Boela, tell me, what is your wish for the future?
Petra, that's a very we wish that COVID is over, and I wish that the war in Russia and Ukraine would stop. I don't know. That's a curveball. I don't actually know how to answer this question. You should have given you a bit of a heads up, a bit of a warning on this one. Listen, Petra, I'm joking now. Can you be a bit more specific? My wish for the future in what regard?
Well, in your career, or in for yourself personally, is there something that you still would like to do and wish to do?
Video at the Petra, it's like I said earlier, that's what we do as winemakers, that we drink wine and we make wine, and that's a challenge. And it's interesting, I've been involved in this property for many, many years, and it's amazing to look back, and I've been in a great position now to look back over the last 20 years and sort of open wines, and you think, where you were in your life and your career, when you made these wines. Mm. So it's amazing to see how these wines evolved over time. And it's amazing to actually have that opportunity and sort of use that, going forward, and say, but this is what happened in the past, and I may have made mistakes, and I think I can do it better, and really just try to fine tune. And that is what we do. We really try to maximize what we have, what the land gives us, and see if we can make it even better. I think that is, you learn from your friends. I mean, I really enjoy traveling. See if you can travel, get some inspiration from other winemaking colleagues around the world, and see if we can incorporate some of their philosophy and some of their wine wisdom, in what we're doing here at Groot Constantia, and even raise the bar a bit higher.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. I mean, that you are open for that, for acquiring new information and new experiences. That's wonderful. So
it's the only, wouldn't say it's the only way, but that is a great way. And I must say, the wine industry is it's amazing like that. I think people are very happy to open their doors internationally, and to welcome winemakers from different countries or different regions, and show them around and allow them to do a harvest there. That's the beauty of us being in the Southern Hemisphere. It is possible to go and actually sort of spend a few weeks with the winemaker in the Northern Hemisphere, and just sort of share ideas. And so it's actually quite amazing that there's this global wine village where people are really happy to share ideas and knowledge. It is pretty special.
Yeah, and I think also the pandemic has made us more aware of things like, because I just thought of my daughter who's 27, who's, suddenly started being interested in wine, and not just drinking it, but really knowing about it, or finding certain labels interesting. So, I think there's also some different interest that will be coming now.
No, it's true, and I agree with you. I think obviously COVID, brought a few interesting challenges to the table, but they definitely opened a few doors as well, and a few avenues, and just the Zoom that we are using at the moment, it's not something, today everybody knows Zoom. 2 years ago, just more than 2 years ago, it was not a reality for us. So the fact that we can do Zoom tastings with clients in the US or in Europe and sort of share ideas, it's amazing how people are open to actually do these kind of things. So so this whole sharing of knowledge is actually quite amazing. So I agree with you. There's lots of opportunities.
Oh, so you do Zoom tastings as well?
It's tricky. So we've done it in South Africa. We actually sent the little samples out, or we've done it in the States, where people get together. Singapore as well. We've done it where people actually sort of get together and they'll buy 3 or 4 bottles, and we little groups, and and I'll sit here in Cape Town and share ideas with them. So so we do it. Or
That's
sometimes
amazing.
it's just exchanging ideas, and it's no wine involved, and we just talk about it. We literally just talk about ideas and winemaking philosophies, and what we find interesting. So sometimes it's conceptual, and some other times they are actually, we because we are very lucky that the wine goes to, I don't know how many countries, like half the wine's exported. So the wines are available in different countries, and people actually make the effort to acquire these wines and get all groups together, and we actually do it like that. So that is fascinating. It's good fun.
Yeah, I think this is amazing. Oh my goodness, this I didn't even think that it's possible. But that sounds that it's wonderful to do. Boela, I just have one more last question for you. Is there a shout out you can do for a restaurant or a coffee shop that you visit regularly in your area?
Yes, the first that comes to mind is my friends at Jonkershuis. That is, I'm very fortunate to live here on Groot Constantia, and Jonkershuis is in the core of the historical core, right next door to the manor house. So it's a big part of our lives. I've got 2 little small kids, and we often go for a walk in the vineyards, or my wife will just take the kids and we go for a walk in the vineyards, and we end up at Jonkershuis, and we just have a bite to eat there. We have a cup of coffee. So that is that is probably the place it's definitely the restaurant that I visit the most, and actually became very good friends with them. So it's like it's an amazing place. So if anybody ever comes to Cape Town, I would love you guys to come and visit us here at Groot Constantia and then stop at Jonker's House for a bite to eat. The food's amazing, and the setting is spectacular.
That's great. I'm going to put, there's probably a website where the menu is available and things like that. I'll put that on the description as well.
Oh, that'll be great. That'll be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Boela, it was so lovely to talk to you. It's a pity that my screen froze, but that's Zoom for you. Maybe in 2 years' time, Zoom will be defrostable. So, but it was so lovely to talk to you, and thank you so much for talking and talking more about the wine and the wine industry. And yeah, I'll put also the website of Groot Constantia on the description of the video.
Perfect. Brenda, thank you very much for reaching out. It was lovely to talk to you. Actually, I watched some of your other videos as well. It is quite amazing. You've got the violinists and musicians and everything on there. So so it really is quite a creative bunch that you've got there on your Instagram. So yeah. So thank you very much for including us in this talk.
That's a pleasure. It's lovely to have you.